you are a prison. Yes, I said you are a prison. I did not say you are in a prison. And the main reason I am creating this video is because, once again, if we do not know who we are, we will live as if we are in a prison without walls that we cannot see. So with that being said, if you guys take a look at the thumbnail, there's a photo of a guy in a cage, basically in jail, if I may say. And then there's a police officer or someone guarding, or a prison guard guarding that prison cell. And that is exactly what is going on with most of us today. We are living in a self-made mental prison that we have constructed with our minds, but we have no idea that we are actually incarcerated in a false reality. So most of you guys by now know that the main topics that I usually speak about is in reference to knowing thyself. And this video is also crucial because I'm going to go into some of the details as to why, what is important to understand, and how this will affect your life as well. If having the understanding that you are in a prison without your awareness, then you could make further, more better, beneficial decisions, because you understand what reality really is. So with that being said, all of us were born in this prison, this place we call the Matrix. In the East, it's called Samsara, the illusion. And all of us at birth were not aware that we were born in this prison. I don't know how many of you guys know about Plato's cave. That would be a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Plato's cave, there was individuals who was born in the cave, and they was pretty much they were bound pretty much in front of a screen, and the only thing they saw was the shadows, and they thought that the shadows were real. However, one individual broke away, and he came back to let the individuals know that the shadows was not reality, because the individual came out of the cave and went and saw the real reality, the real world for what it is, and he came back to, if I may use the word, enlighten those beings. However, those beings rejected that truth, because the only thing they knew was being in jail, or in the cave, if I may say. And that is exactly what is going on with most of us, many of us today. We do not realize that the reality that we were born in, the illusory reality, is a construct of the mind. So, just briefly going back over what I said, very, very briefly, most of us might not be aware that the actual prison that we are in, we created ourselves. And as time goes on, we will understand how that illusory prison, the bars that we contain ourselves in, we realize that the identity, having the false identity of who we are, not knowing who we are, things of that sort, subject matters of that sort, how crucial it is to know who we are, and only then that prison, those prison walls can come down. But most of us, we live in a prison that we've created by ourselves, for ourselves, without even being aware at all that we are in a prison of the mind. Just like the Matrix, not understanding the reality around us is based on the mind. And what happens is, most individuals, because we are not aware of this, we believe, again, because of the root cause, not knowing who we are, we believe that we are real per se. We believe that the false self is the true self. The false, illusory non-self is the primary core self, and we believe that to be who we are. However, because of this belief, we tend to look through the lens of the physical, finite mind eyes, and we see a world, and we assume that the world is also concrete as well. However, this delusion of seeing the world as being the primary or the fundamental reality externally is somewhat incorrect. Yes, it is a reality from the external world, from the finite mind's perspective. The world is real, it does exist. However, from the infinite mind's perspective, it is all an appearance. And if this is not making any sense, please go ahead and watch some of my videos. Who am I? Specifically, who am I? That would be a great video to start with. And that also would add some solidity to what I am saying. Because again, most individuals might have just started to come across this type of information, and it may seem foreign to many. However, again, this is because we were born, most of us were born, or many of us, I shouldn't say most of us, but many of us who were born in the Western cultures, we tend to not be too familiar with some of the things that I may be saying thus far. However, back to what I was saying, because of this false self, this illusory self, not knowing who we are, that self itself is the prison. You are the prison guard, you are the judge, you are the jury, you are all of these things. And throughout the world, there are many, many, many very harsh prisons, difficult, you might say almost impossible to escape. However, there is some possibility to escape most of those prisons. But this prison is one of the most difficult prisons to escape from that ever existed. And the reason is because this is all we knew. When we were born, we opened our eyes and we saw the world, and we saw our family, we saw our friends, we saw everybody else participating in this illusory, this Maya, the matrix per se. And so we automatically assume that this is the fundamental reality. So it is not anybody's fault if they do not believe otherwise, because that was the purpose of the illusion. To come into the illusion would have not been an easy task just to understand. I too always did not have this understanding of this nature of reality in the beginning as well. I too believe that I was a solid, fixed, unchanging entity. I too believe that the earth, the world, and everything that I see around me, the appearances, I too believe that they were fundamental and they were unchanging, and that is all reality existed of at one point in my life as well. However, as time went on and my understanding and my knowledge, wisdom, and understanding grew, and as I came to understand the true nature of reality, basically because of coming to really know who I am, that was the root cause, the catalyst that basically brought the house of cards down. So that is what this video is about today, getting an understanding that the reality of the false self is the root cause, and is the prison that imprisons the true self. And without the understanding of the true self, the I-ness, the isness, the consciousness, the pure awareness that you are, you will always be imprisoned by the false self. And that is the design by its nature, to keep us in prison without ever coming to reality and accepting and knowing reality for what it is. So very briefly, like I was saying, just a very brief recap before we move along. The prison that we are in, again, we all came into this what they call the Maya, the matrix, the dream state, whatever we want to call it. We all came into this illusion, and if it was something easy to break free from, everyone would be doing it. That is why it's called awakening, enlightenment, and different terminologies in the East. So again, you have physical prisons that you can break free. I mean, are very difficult, that you cannot easily break free from. Physical prisons all over the world. However, there is a very high possibility of breaking free from those prisons. However, this prison of the mind is one of the most complex prisons, and almost everyone, pretty much from birth, we all of us are bound by this prison, and there are only a few that actually ever break free. Like I said earlier, just like Plato's cave, we all were in this cave, chained from birth, watching the illusions on the wall, the shadows on the wall, perceiving those shadows to be reality, but however, not knowing that the illusions, the shadows are not reality. And that is what we're talking about, the ego, the false self, because that is all we know. We knew when we came in the world, we knew I, first and foremost. We believed the body to be real. We believed the earth, the physical things to be real. So that is expected of us. All of us, there's no way around it. There's no way around. There's only a few people that may have came into this world and was able to escape this with this understanding. That's a very few. But for the most of us, almost all of us, we were trapped in this illusion. We came into this illusion believing that this was solid. And again, even quantum physics science now is starting to come to conclusions that what we see may be some type of illusion. They talk about game theory and things of that sort. Quantum physics goes into great detail with the double slit experiment and so forth and so forth. But again, this illusion is not some video game that's so easy a code so easily to break. So with that being said, again, I just want to stress the fact that everyone in this reality, it's just like the movie The Matrix. Neo, when he found that he was inside of some type of illusory world, it was very difficult for him to swallow at first, but over time he came to the realization that yes, it all was a dream. So that is the goal of enlightenment. That is the goal of consciousness, to pretty much not allow the ego, the false self, to keep us trapped, believing that the false self is the real true identity versus the core essence of who you are, the I, the isness, the I-ness, the beingness of who you truly are. And that is what non-duality is all about, coming to self-realization, knowing who you truly are. That is why one of the scriptures, if I remember clearly, it was Joshua, yes, Jesus said, be transformed by the renewal. And again, I thank each and every one of you guys who are watching the stream. Your attention is very, very, very much appreciated. I cannot stress that enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of the mind. And however, the only way the mind can be transformed is through understanding, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding through self-inquiry, through self-evaluation, by coming to know one's true self for what one true self really is. But until then, like I said, it is next to impossible to break free from this illusory reality, the self that is imprisoned, the self that is imprisoned. It is not actually imprisoned per se, it is perceived to be imprisoned because the false self job is to keep it imprisoned. The false ego does not want to give up being priority in our lives. The false self does not want to give up its position as the Lord God that created all. The ego is the one that does not want the true self to be revealed. So again, it's not like you are in a prison, you are the prison itself. The person that you call I, the person that you call you are the prison that has your true self imprisoned. And this false self I, this you that you think that you are, again, the only solution to break free from this prison is to know who you are. And eventually the chains, the illusions, and the imagination of the reality that really exists will come to fruition, and the false reality, the chains, the walls, the bars of the false illusory prison that you are trapped in will dissolve as well. And eventually they will actually dissipate, and you will disappear, they will disappear, and you will come back to being your true, natural, normal, free self. However, just because you came out of prison, that does not mean that the world will disappear. However, your understanding of the world and who you are will have a lot more clarity. Therefore, one of the main reasons we are so uh, bound to this illusory prison that we have ourselves trapped in is because of attachments. All of the attachments that we are attached to in this world are keeping us bound in this samsara. The attachments, the desires, the lust, the greed, all of these things. And the reason these attachments exist is because we do not, once again, know who we are. Because if we know who we are, we would not be so attached. And there is no other option than to be attached when you are attached to a false self. So therefore, the false self does not know the true self. So the false self always misleads the individuals, telling them that, hey, if you get this thing, this external thing, you will be happy, you will be free. If you acquire this or that thing, you will be happy. If you get in a relationship with this person or you get that job, you will be free. I will release you from your bondage. However, as we all know by now, we are never, ever, ever released once we achieve the goals that we have achieved. And for those of us, also, please go and watch my video, Life Has No Purpose. That video also talks a lot about what I'm talking about as well. So very briefly, very brief recap. So again, this information that I'm speaking about here today or tonight is again more esoteric, non-duality subject matters. You would find this information. You have, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. This type of knowledge is not, you're not going to hear this type of information in your traditional Abrahamic faiths. And again, nothing wrong with any particular belief systems. But however, in the West, we tend to see the self, the false self, as the true self. We tend to look at the body, the eye. We consider ourselves to be the source. But when we go study, again, the Western, the Eastern philosophies, all of the I, the true I, they would consider to be consciousness or awareness, things of that sort, Brahman, and so the Atman. You might hear those guys use those terms, and so those guys state that the true self, that is the true self, the consciousness that we are, the awareness that we are. And so if we do not know who we are, coming to our true understanding, true self evaluation, we will believe, because we believe the false self to be true, we think that if we accumulate certain physical things, because we, again, the root cause of all suffering, according to the Buddhists, is desire. Because, and there's nothing wrong with having desire. By no means have desires. Get everything if as much as you can in this lifetime. It's okay. I'm not saying do not have any desires, but according to the Buddhists, they would state that the root cause of all suffering is desire. Because when we want some things, we don't get those things, we tend to be extremely unhappy. No matter what it may be, we might want to get a promotion. We don't get it, we're sad. We want to get a new relationship. We're unhappy when it falls apart. A new car, clothing, whatever it may be in the material world, all comes from desire. And because we don't know who we are, we assume that when we acquire the material thing, we think that happiness is going to follow. But we have all realized and experienced this. As soon as we get the thing, whatever it was we thought that it was going to make us happy, we were happy for some time. Yes, we might have been happy for some time. Some things make us more happier than others. That is true. That is correct. I cannot disagree with that. However, we all know when we first got a new car, first new car, we treated the car fairly nice, kept it clean and so forth. And after a period of time, the car became more of a burden. We had to clean the car, to pay for insurance, get it serviced. The list goes on and on. When we wanted the dream girl or the dream guy, we wanted this girl or this guy so bad to be a part of our life. When we got to know the person over a period of time, we realized the person was not all cracked up the way how we thought them to be. We realized that the person had flaws just as much as us, or sometimes the person that we were so enamored about had even more flaws than us as well. But again, all of this disappointment comes from the ego, the false self. And so in the West, when we hear the word ego, we tend to think of the word ego as being, oh, this person is very self-conceited, this person has a big ego. That is what we say. Oh, this person is a chauvinist pig, or someone seems to be very arrogant. That is what we consider to be the ego in the West. But however, in the East, the ego is not something physical at all. The ego is literally the false identity, the person that you think you are. You think that you are a doctor, a lawyer, a carpenter, a barber, a beautician, a baker, a gardener, whatever you think you are in this world, whatever title you label yourself to be. I am a male, I am a female, I am a sir, I am a mom, I am a madam, whatever it may be. In the East would be considered the ego. The false self is you. Literally, the prison that you are in is literally you. The ego itself, like I said, is the God, the judge, the jury, and the executioner. That is why it's so difficult to break free from these prison walls, because we believe we do not see the self itself as being the prison. We believe that the outside world may be the prison. We might say society is the prison. We might say that our environment is the prison. We might say that our financial situation is the prison. Again, all illusions, not understanding that the true prison is literally the self, and only through self-inquiry, self-realization, that those prison walls will be coming down. And that's what this video is all about, and I'm going to go into more depth as we go on as well. So again, the false self keeps us in the prison because it believes that if you find out who you truly are, it will no longer exist. Just like the thumbnail, the security guard or the prison officer, he knows that if crime does not exist, he knows that if no one goes to jail, he would not have a job. Also, that applies to the judge, the correction officers, the probation officers, anyone who keeps charge and check of criminals. They know that if there is no crime, they will not have a job. And I'm just giving this as an illustration. I'm not saying that we do not need judges and we do not need police officers. I am saying that their job is based on crime. If there was no thieves, no theft, there would never be any securities. There would never be any security cameras. There would never be any type of surveillance. However, because of theft, that is why buildings, houses, and people have security cameras in their facilities, protecting their property and other things as well. So again, without these things, there would not be a need for a police or a security officer. And that same thing applies to the ego. The false self knows that if the false self knows that if you find out who and what you truly are, the ego knows that it will die and it will not have a job ever again. So the ego will do everything in its power to keep you in the prison that only you can break free out of. No pastor, no priest, no prophet, no one can break you from this prison but yourself. Only you have to come to the conclusion to realize you are in a prison. So the first step is to actually know that you are in a prison, because most of us, we do not know we are in a prison. We are living comfortably in the prison thinking that we are free. So again, very brief recap, because I don't want that to be not pretty much overlooked. So like I said, the job of the police is to try to reduce crime, or law and order, or prevent crime, if I may say as well. Security guards, judges, all of those guys have something to do with crime. Not so much all judges and all, however, crime is one of the main major duties of policing and security. So if there was no crime, we would have no police, we would have no security guards, we would not even have any security cameras. That is the reason we have security cameras, to try to reduce or prevent crime from ever happening. Or even if the crime has happened, we use the cameras so we can see the culprits who are actually try to actually commit the crime. So the same thing applies to the ego. The ego, the false self job is to, again, just like if there was no crime, there would be no need for the police. If the true self was realized, the true isness, the consciousness that you always realize, there would be no job for the ego. And the ego knows this, the ego knows that if you find out that you are not this physical thing, you are not this body, you are not this identity, this false identity that you identify yourself with every day, that you work so hard to go out and try to accumulate possessions and money and this and that, that your blood, sweat, and tears go into everything that you do in this life is connected to this false self. The ego knows that if you find out the truth, the job of the ego will no longer be needed. So the ego knows that, and the ego does every single thing in its power to keep its job. Just like the police, if the crime goes away, no need for police. If the crime goes away, no need for jail. If you come to realize who you are, the core, the very essence of who you are, the ego will have to dissipate as well. But however, the ego is very crafty. The ego knows that you are not aware of this. The ego knows that most of us do not do any type of deep meditation, any type of deep introspection. The ego knows this as a fact. So therefore, the ego continuously deludes, hides behind the false self, which is the false self. The ego is the false self, and it tells us, hey, if you get this thing, you're going to be happy. If you get this thing, you're going to be great. If you do this thing, you're going to be golden. And throughout our entire lives, all we do is search, seek to find things, to find happiness in objective things, and we never, ever, 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 over a period of time, be permanently happy. Because if happiness technically was in objective things, if we had found the thing that we wanted, we would be permanently happy. But it's obviously that what the things that we think that would make us happy, we are not permanently happy at all. So therefore, that hypothesis that things, that objective things make us happy is false. And the ego knows that, and the ego knows that it's not going to just disappear just like that. Crime is not going to just go away. So the police job is always going to be, for the most part, be needed. And the ego knows that 99.999% of the individuals is never ever going to look into the self and say, wow, who am I? The average person is never going to ask themselves, who am I? What am I? The average person is not going to go into no deep meditation and question the false self to the point to realize that the false self is the actual prison keeping the true self in bondage. The average person will not do this, especially in today's world. We are so caught up in material things. We're so caught up in all of these other different aspects that has us blinded and has us somewhat uh, uh, hypnotized, believing that this thing is important, and that one of the most important things that we ever can do in this lifetime is know who we are. 99.999% of us in the world believes we are free. However, when we evaluate our lives, we know that we are not free because we cannot stop doing what we are doing. We cannot leave our jobs. We cannot leave our relationships. We cannot stop doing the things that we most likely, in many cases, do not want to continue doing, but we cannot do it. We cannot stop. That is why we are not free. And we know it as well. We know that we will always be bound to having to do certain things because that is the way life really is. So despite the fact how free you may feel to be, you are not actually free. As long as you do not know who you are, I do not care how much money you have. I don't care how, whatever it may be, physically attractive, whatever it may be, you will never be free. You will never taste the taste of freedom if you do not know who you are. So again, this false self, its job is to keep you in prison. That is its only job. And it knows that if you ever one day come to the conclusion that, hey, I am not this false self, I am not my feelings, I am not my body, I am not my job, I am not my emotions, I am not my thoughts, I am not my money, I am not my career, I am not my looks, I am not any of these things. And if you ever come to that conclusion, the false self, the ego, is dead. And the prison gates will dissolve, they will melt away like butter. And there will be no more reason to be in fear, worrying about this and worrying about that, because you know that the only things that are happening around you are all perceptions. All of the emotional, psychological, physical problems, and all of these things that have kept you trapped in bondage, those feelings will dissipate and disappear as well. And I am not saying that there will be no pain. However, we are not trying to stop pain. The goal here is to eliminate suffering. That is the root cause of knowing thyself, knowing suffering. Like I said before, maybe I've not said the actual meaning of suffering. However, one meaning of suffering is basically to not want to accept reality, something that exists the way it is for what it is. Basically, you are not happy with something and you are not accepting something as reality the way it is. And that is the root cause of suffering. However, when we come to the realization to know we are, then only then we can eliminate the root cause of suffering, because we would know that all of these external things that may be appearing to happen to us, they are not happening to us at all, because the true self is a neutral thing. It is like the screen, it is like the sky, which everything appears on, but it does not affect you at all. The true self, the I amness, the isness, and that is what we are talking about today. That is who we are trying to let free out of this false illusory jail. And after that false self has come to the conclusion that, hey, I am just nothing more than the wind, that will release you from being in bondage and being in prison. So the prison that you are in was created by you and is you. And when I say you, again, I am not talking about the true you, the pure consciousness, the awareness that you really are. I am talking about the false you, the identities that you have, the labels that you have given yourself. I am a teacher, I am a carpenter, I am a plumber, I am a barber, I am a mother, I am a husband, I am a boyfriend, I am a aunt, I am a uncle. Those are all labels, all nouns, places, things, and all of these things, we tend to believe that we are these things. Our ideas, abstract ideas, we feel that we are happy, we are sad. None of these things are us at all. All of these things are ever changing and never ever consistently, persistently permanent. However, because we do not know who we are, these things keep us in bondage. I am financially broke. No, you are not. You are not financially broke because there is no you per se to be financially broke. The illusory false self may be broke, which was bring me to another topic. So we do not understand the layers of the mind. The mind, we have the conscious. So, like I was saying again, this is a very powerful concept that I think should not be overlooked. And that concept is having an understanding of who you are at the core. And one example that most individuals in the East tend to use or utilize, they tend to use the screen analogy. The true self is more like the screen, the video screen that is playing the movies, the screen on your phone, whatever screen you could think of. Let's just use the TV screen, for example. Your TV screen plays movies, and so your TV screen might be playing a horror movie, a happy movie one day, a drama, a thriller, whatever movie that screen is playing. What most individuals don't understand is that the screen itself is not affected by what's being played on it. The screen does not have any emotions at all. The screen does not have any feelings at all. If there's a horror movie being played on the screen does not feel sad, the screen does not feel scared, the screen does not have any emotion, feelings, emotional input about what is being played on the screen at all. So the same thing applies to when you come to understand who you are at the core, the essence, the consciousness, the isness, the awareness. The awareness is like the screen. Everything is just being played on the screen of awareness, and awareness is simply aware of it, but it's not actually affecting awareness at all. So because you do not know who you are at the core, again, you feel like when you something happens to you, and then you become emotional about it, whatever it may be, you become emotional about it. So you feel like now your emotions are you. So because not knowing who you are again, you think that your emotions are you. When something happens negative, and then on a job or whatever the case may be, you got fired. So you think that you got fired. If your relationship ends, you think that your relationship ends. Whatever happens to you from an ego perspective, the false self, because of not knowing who you are, we tend to identify with the objective things and objective reality, and we label ourselves as being affected. But again, like I said, you are like the screen that the movies play on, and the screen is never ever affected by whatever happens. So for example, the background behind me, the clouds, the space that the clouds reside in, the clouds come and go, they dissipate, they disappear, they come and go, and they go back from wherever they came from. But again, they do not, of the clouds do not affect the space that it's in. If the rain comes, the rain does not affect the space at all, because the space contains the clouds and the rain and the lightning and the thunder as well. So the consciousness, the isness, the awareness that you are also maintains and holds and contains the ego, the emotions, the feelings, and whatever else you may be, your thoughts and so forth, is all contained in awareness and consciousness. But you think that you are the feelings, the job, the character, whatever that is. You think that you are. You think that you are the dream character or the game character. But from the esoteric perspective, you are none of these things. You are literally like a blank screen that everything is appearing on. But because of not knowing who you are, once again, you identify yourself with the things that is happening on the screen. Mind, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. There are many different layers, the superconscious mind, the preconscious mind, all of these different layers. However, we are talking about the elementary concepts of the mind, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is what we tend to believe is the true mind. The conscious mind is what we tend to believe is the ultimate mind. We tend to look at the things in the world, our feelings, the things that we can see, things that we can feel, the things that we can taste, the things that we can touch with our five senses, what we can smell, what we can hear. We tend to believe that these things are the real reality. However, then we tend to look secondary. We tend to look at the conscious mind as primary. Then we may say, well, the unconscious mind is more important, is less important. And then we say the subconscious mind is even more or less important or not important at all. However, that we tend to have this backwards. We tend to look at consciousness being the fundamental reality. Then we say unconsciousness is not so important. Then we say the subconscious mind is just unimportant altogether. That is incorrect. Just like saying most of us think that being the wake state is more important than the dream state, and then we think the deep sleep state is not important at all. So, excuse me, so we tend to look at reality backwards. What if it was backwards? What if the deep sleep state, the state of nothingness, was the primary state, and then the dream state was the second most important state, and the last state there is the conscious state? So we are imprisoned looking at the reality that we were born in. From a fundamental perspective, we are looking at the fundamental reality as being the primary reality, but we are actually looking at things backwards. We are thinking that the reality is more important than the unconscious mind. We are looking at the reality more important than the subconscious mind. However, it is backwards. What if, again, just like being awake is the dream state, and being in the deep sleep is the actual reality? What if it was reversed? When we wake up in the morning and we go around to do our things, we tend to believe that this is the reality. However, when we go to sleep and we go into deep sleep, we say that, hey, that is not the reality. But what if we are incorrect? What if our daily lives, waking walking, talking, doing all of these things? What if these things are actually the illusion? And that is the conclusion what you will come to once you have come to understand and know who you truly are, the true self, the I-ness, the isness, the consciousness that you truly are. And that is what I'm talking about here today, trying to break free from this false illusory self. And the only way, again, that could be achieved if we come to know oneself for who oneself really is. So let me just recap on that very briefly because there was a lot of powerful information in what I said. So, like I was saying, the majority of us, we tend to think that the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind is the least important mind, and we tend to believe that our conscious mind is the most important mind. And that is actually incorrect because the subconscious mind is what actually controls the conscious mind. Everything that we do, for the most part, is run by the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. Everything that we do it unconsciously. The people that we like, the places that we want, the food that we want to eat, all of these things are working in the background of the subconscious mind. So we tend to think that the things that we are aware of is more important than the things that we are unaware of. There are some individuals may have had early childhood trauma issues in the earlier life, relationship, they have maybe been abused or certain things happen to them a lot earlier on in life, and as they got older they may not have this ability to love so freely and love so openly. They may, years and years may have went by and they still have problems actually opening up or trusting individuals because of what may have happened to them earlier on in life. Some individuals have to go to therapy for years and years and years just so they could, so a therapist could go deep down into the psyche and find out what's really going on with the individuals at the core. So we tend to believe, again, the unconscious, the subconscious mind is actually the most important. Sorry, the subconscious mind is not the most important part of the psyche. But however, what if we were incorrect? Because what we tend to think is, we tend to think that reality, when we see in our waking state, the waking state, when we go to work, when we eat, when we do whatever we do in our waking state, we tend to think that that is the most important fundamental state. And when we go to sleep, in our deep sleep, in our dream state sleep, we think that that is not as important. But the mind is not, scientifically, the mind does not even know what is real from what's not real. The mind cannot tell you whether the dream is real or reality is real. So that itself should make you really question reality, because if the mind does not even know the difference between a dream and reality, but yet we tend to believe that reality, the reality, going to work and doing all of the things that we do in our everyday life, we tend to put the utmost importance on the physical objective world, and we tend to ignore the subconscious, the invisible part of the mind. And that is a big mistake that I think many of us, we do on a daily basis. We pay very little, next to no attention to the deeper side of the mind, somewhere our most hidden wounds may be. In psychology, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, those guys, they call that the shadow. So the shadow side of us is where the majority of our wounds, or some we have issues that we may be afraid to even, we don't even want to look at some things. Some things we suppress, and just because we suppress a particular thing does not mean it goes anywhere. It just means that it's pretty much sitting dormant until something activates that particular trauma or whatever it may be. You could be a person that may have had being traumatized in a relationship much early on in life, and then when you get into a relationship, you always, for some reason, the relationship always ends poorly. The relationship always ends very bad, and you always say to yourself, why can't I keep a person? Why can't I do this? Why can't my relationships work? Because there's underlying things going on in the subconscious mind. You may be feeling subconsciously not good enough. You might not be feeling worthy enough of love. You might not be feeling that you deserve love. There's so much reasons why we behave the way we behave on an unconscious level. That is why this video is so important, because I'm talking about the prison that we're in. The mind keeps us trapped, believing that we are free. We literally think we are free, but most of us are not free. Most of us literally are in bondage. So this prison that we're in is not something that we should just overlook and kind of like pass by. Oh, no, that is not the case, because that is one of the reasons this prison, this unconscious prison, is what keeps us in the stagnant position that many of us are in today. Many of us want to make progress, we cannot make any progress. Many of us want to move ahead in life, we cannot move ahead in life because there are hidden barriers. There are things that the ego, the false self, that keeps us having these limited unconscious beliefs, and we are programmed daily to go by a rule, a book, and we follow this program every day. We can't get ahead, we can't make any progress, all because again we are trapped in a prison, an invisible prison that we have created. And like I said, we, the ego, the false self, is not only the prison, it is the guard, it's the bar, it's the police, it is the judge, it's the jury, it's the executioner, the false self. And again, according to all esoteric Eastern philosophies, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, every single philosophical concept, spiritual concept will say that only way to break free from this prison is to know thyself. And that is what we are trying to achieve: self-realization, self-contemplation, self-introspection, self. Until we know who we are, we will always be in bondage, chasing after things, thinking that this thing will set us free, that thing will set us free, this thing will open the chains, this thing is going to reduce the suffering, this thing is going to stop the suffering. And again, according to the Buddhists, the only thing can stop suffering is to know thyself. Come to some true understanding of who you are, because the true self in itself cannot suffer. Like I said, you are like the TV screen. The TV screen cannot feel any pain, despite the fact how many atrocities may be playing on the screen. The screen does not feel any pain. No matter what is going on your TV screen, what type of movie you might be playing, there is no effect on the screen at all. So from a consciousness, awareness, the isness, the I-ness, the beingness of who you are, nothing that is you're experiencing in this life, whatever, how bad it may be, however the worst thing you could think of that's going on in your life, it literally is affecting the false self, the ego, the identity that you think you are. But on a fundamental level, from a consciousness perspective, you are untouched. You might say, well, yes, there might be no benefits, and some people might be afraid, but there is a lot of benefits why you will be to come to this conclusion, because again, you will be free. You will be free from all captivity. You will be free from bondage, mental, psychological, emotional. You will, for once in your life, see life for what it really is. And that is what they would call, from a spiritual perspective, to actually be born again. So you don't actually need to actually go to a particular pastor, priest, prophet, or whoever the case may be to come to this realization, because the only person who can do this for you is you. For example, most individuals might not be aware of the concept of the false self. There's something even greater than this false self that we believe to be true. When we look at, there's something what we call spiritual. This is actually a Buddhist concept that is called spiritual materialism. And most individuals might not be aware of this concept. Most individuals might believe that the concept of achieving material things is the only thing that we can accumulate. However, there is also something called spiritual materialism. And just very briefly, though, this is really a concept in the Buddhist. You guys could check it out. It's called spiritual materialism. However, I just want to say something very briefly before I move on. Like I said a few seconds ago, the only person can set you free from this prison is you. Nobody else can break you out of this prison but you. No pastor, no priest, no prophet, no one but you. That is why only thing that I do is I try to bring information, I try to educate, I try to open individuals' eye, open individuals' mind, help them to maybe have a different perspective on certain things, certain ideas that they may have had. Maybe I might say something and maybe that individual might think of something that they never thought of before. Maybe I might spark some type of different interest in a particular area that they never looked into. And so, but however, all of the footwork must be done by you. The prison walls are never going to come down until you do the work, the self introspection. You could lead the horse to the water, but you cannot make the horse drink. You can lead anyone down the path of righteousness or the way to the path of salvation or whatever you want to call it, self awakening, realization. But that person themselves have to literally do all of the work. Nobody can save you but you. Do not look in the sky, looking up, thinking that somebody is going to come out the sky. Bob Marley, I think it was Bob Marley who said that some song he sang, a song he sang some time back, looking into the sky that someone is going to come and save you. No, the only person who can save you is you. So again, from an esoteric perspective, this is what they call in Buddhism or Hinduism, Sikhism, to be born again, is to literally come to self-realization, not going and to be, again, nothing wrong with any type of Abrahamic tradition, but again, we are talking about self-realization, not literally someone, no baptism in the water or nothing of the sort to help you, rather than actually saving yourself. Thank you so much. Yeah, game 2999. I think that's what is it. Yagami. I think Yagami 999. I think you. Thank you so much for the follow. Thank you so much. Again, your attention is so much appreciated. That is what this channel is all about, trying to spread more awareness, more consciousness, and more light. So again, nobody can save you, no matter who you may think. You could go to any, like I said, any your traditional pastor, traditional priest, your traditional pope. Nobody, even me, I'm here talking all of this stuff. I can't do it for you. You have to do the work for yourself. And again, so this concept is what I'm going to talk about now. Is called spiritual materialism, and I'm going to get into that very shortly. And that spiritual materialism is something that when we try to break free from this illusory self, the illusory, the ego is such a crafty culprit per se. It will do anything to keep you in the dark. So for example, most individuals, when they tend to want to break free from this false illusory self, one of the first things they tend to go into is religion. They would look at religion as the solution. However, the false self, the ego, is such a crafty, again, culprit. It will use anything to keep you in bondage, anything that could keep you. It even will use God. It will use anything that it could think of to constantly leave you in the dark. So for example, you might go and say, hey, okay, I'm going to go and become a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, or whatever the case may be. Again, however, without knowing the true self, who you truly are, it is most likely you will still be in bondage. Because again, without understanding who you are, first and foremost, you will not be free, even if you pick up some type of religion. Because what the ego does, what the false self does, it uses that belief system that you may now just acquired. Say, for example, you are a Christian. There's always going to be an I. I am a Christian. I am a Buddhist. I am a Rastafarianism. I am a Hindu. I am a Mormon. I. If you guys notice, what I'm saying is the I still exists. Even after you have gone and entered into a relationship with some type of religion, you are still saying I this, I that. So the ego now, instead of accumulating material, physical things, now the ego has you accumulating spiritual things. So now you say, okay, I am going to church every day, every other day, 3 days, 4 days, 6 days a week. Now the ego makes you feel, okay, I am better than this other churchgoer because they only show up to church once a year. They only show up once in a while. They do not pay tithes. They do not pay for this. They do not pay tithes as much as I do. They do not do the things that I do. And that is what I am saying. Even the things that we do spiritually, we tend to believe that we are accumulating spiritual knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. However, the ego is also using these things against us and making us feel like we are achieving spiritual gains. However, it is still not letting us know that the I still exists. So that is a very powerful, powerful information. I don't really want to just go over that, overlook that information because, like I said, the Buddhists have this concept they call spiritual materialism. And so what happens is, like I said, the ego, the false self, its job literally is to keep you fooled and bamboozled to believe that you are the false self. I am this, I am that. That is the job of the ego. The ego, I am whatever it might be. I am a teacher, I am a dentist, I am a barber, I am a Uber driver. It doesn't make a difference as long as you identify with the I. Once the I is the primary self in your from your perspective, you are bamboozled by the ego. So what happens is over a period of time, what you will see happen is a lot of individuals they start to go down some type of spiritual journey and they start to feel like maybe okay I'm starting to get a some I'm starting to get a show some interest in enlightenment and things of the sort. They may start to watch a few Eastern videos, Guru and those gurus from the East, and they may start to go down that path. And then over a period of time, what's going to happen is the ego is going to realize, say, okay, I realize that this person is starting to like want to break free from this the bondage to false self. So what most individuals will do, the next thing they would do, they might start to reduce some of the material desires. Yes, I'm going to cut back on partying. Yes, I'm going to cut back on drinking so much. Yes, I'm going to cut back on smoking so heavily. Yes, I'm going to cut back on all of these material things. And so what happens is the next disguise that the ego decides to hide itself is in religion. So the ego decides to say, hey, this guy or this girl is catching on to who I am. I don't want them to figure out I don't really exist. So I'm going to try to convince them to become a particular, follow a particular religious belief. Now, I am a Christian. Now, I am a Mormon. I am a Buddhist. I am a Hindu. I am a monk. I am any type of religion that you could think of. That is the next goal of the ego, to hide itself behind some type of religious belief. And so, therefore, when we hide behind our religious or spiritual beliefs, what will happen is over a period of time is the I, the false self, still exists. The false self now hides behind all of these particular belief systems, and then now you see the ego saying, the ego will still find a way to glorify the false self. The ego will say, okay, I go to church, like I said, I go to church 4 or 5 times a week. My neighbor only goes to church 2 3 times a week, so therefore I am still better than him or her. The ego will say, I put in X amount of money in tithes, and my neighbor does not put X money in tithes, so therefore I must be more spiritual than her. The ego will say, I pray for 2 3 4 hours straight. My neighbor does not pray at all, so therefore I must be more spiritual than him or her. I believe in this particular God. I know or I believe that my neighbor God is false, so therefore my God must be superior, more superior than their God, so therefore I am more spiritually wiser. You see? So now we're no longer pursuing physical things, we're no longer pursuing objective things in reality to soothe the ego. We are now using spirituality, we're now using religion, we're now using all of these things to pretty much uh, still keep us in some type of I bondage. I am better than you spiritually now. It's no longer I have more money than you. It's no longer I am more attractive than you. It's no longer I have a bigger house than you. It is now something on a much more deeper, subtle level, a level that we cannot see. I am more spiritually better than you as well. So we have to also take that in account and be careful when we are going down our spiritual journey that we do not necessarily fall into a trap of actually saying that I am better than somebody more spiritually which still is keeping the ego alive, because the ultimate goal is to eliminate the I completely, completely, not hiding behind any type of objective concept, any type of theory, of any type of idolatry, or any type of thing that actually is connected to the I. Very deep concept to grasp, but again, that is what this video is all about as well. So again, what we tend to do, we believe that we are paying tithes. We believe that we are going to church. We believe that we are going to prayer meeting. And so therefore, the only person that's doing these things is the I. So all of our spiritual acts are now being accumulated, but we are still trapped in the false illusory self, the false world, the Maya, the matrix. We still do not come to the conclusion to know who we truly are. So only thing we're doing now, we went from being more ego, more physical type of thing, but however, then we went into a more spiritual ego, having more spiritual ego. You know, I pay more tithes than you. I attend more church than you. I sing in the church choir. I do prayer meetings more than you. I. The situation is always the I. So until that I actually transpires and actually dissipates with the understanding, only with the understanding, then the true self can actually be revealed. So until that happens, the false self will always be the winner. So again, after again we have come to the conclusion that yes, we're going to go into some type of spiritual realm, some spiritual understanding. That too is also a trap. Until the I, the true self, the true self is revealed, we will just trade in one ego for another, from the physical ego to the spiritual ego, and that is what is going to happen. We are going to constantly believe the false self to be true, because again, no matter what you do, the ego does not, I repeat, the ego does not want to dissolve itself. So be careful for, again, it is called spiritual materialism. I think it was some Tibetan monk, if I remember clearly. Don't hold me to it, but I think he was the one who coined the term. It is an actual term. You guys can go look it up. Spiritual materialism, again, being the opposite of physical materialism. Physical materialism is basically accumulating objects, cars, houses, money, finances, things of that sort. That is what material physical materialism is. But now we're talking about spiritual materialism, basically accumulating a bunch of spiritual things, but still not being aware of who and what we truly are. So that is what we are talking about here today, trying to get an understanding of the depths of all the aspects we need to cover, because this prison cell is not an easy task to escape from, because the prison cell was designed by you at all costs, and it does not care who you are. Its main goal is to keep the true self entrapped, enslaved, and it no matter what. Even you now, this, if we understand the spiritual materialism from that perspective, even our good deeds, you know, we could be working for the shelter. We could be, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with working for the shelter. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with doing good deeds. However, again, if we do not come to the true realization of who we are, we will just be trapped, basically rubbing sweetness onto dirt, if I may say. We still don't understand that we are the false self. So if we could go and do charity work, and the ego will still be there saying, oh, I do charity work, and we still will look at others who do not do charity work as being less inferior than us. Oh, my church is this, my church is that. Oh, my mosque is this. Oh, my belief is that. I serve the poor. I do this and I do that. Yes, these are all great things. Yes, these are all good things. I am not saying that we should not do these things. However, what I am saying is that these things are all still secondary until we come to the true understanding of who we are. So please take a look at this spiritual materialism, and this would be one of the last levels, if I may say, that needs to also be broken or be aware of, because again, you could be out there doing a bunch of things, doing a bunch of good works, trying to earn your way into heaven, if I may say, and however, that will also not, you would not achieve that goal, because you also will be basically just adding another layer of illusion on the false self. I am doing charity work. I am helping the poor. I am helping the needy. I am helping the sick. I. As long as that I exists in your vocabulary, there is always going to be suffering because the false self is always going to be seeking some type of reward. The false self is always going to be wanting to get some type of recognition for whatever it does. And that is why if we are doing things from the false self perspective, there will always be some type of disappointment. I am doing all of this work, but I am not getting any reward. I am doing this, but I'm not getting any praise. I am doing that, but I'm not getting this or that. And that again is because of the false self believing itself to be the one doing these things when there is no false self that exists at all. That is why we need to come to a conclusion, whereas we are the true self, the pure consciousness, the pure awareness, the self that does not do anything, but the self that just exists. For example, we will look at ourselves as being the flow state when they talk about the. So let me just interject here very briefly because I said a mouthful. So like I was saying, one of the very last stages to self-realization or awakening is this material spiritual spiritual materialism. When we tend to, now we are giving up some of our material things and now we're starting to get more, feeling more holy than thou. And so now we start to put a lot of effort into doing more spiritual things. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with doing charity work. There's nothing wrong with doing anything of that sort. But however, we must be very careful when we are doing these things and try to be aware of where is the motivation coming from. Is it still ego driven? Is it still I do charity work and you do not, so therefore I am better than you? I give to the poor and you do not, so therefore I am still better than you. I go to the hospital and I do some work at the hospital to help the sick, and you do not, so I am still more spiritual than you. So we still have to really take in the great consideration of we have to take in a great consideration of the things that we're doing. We have to take in a great consideration that if we are doing these things, all of the charity work, all of our good deeds, and if we're still doing these things with the wrong notion that we may do these things, but we still want some type of reward. We still want some type of recognition that I am doing charity work. I am doing this for my neighborhood. I. As long as that I still exists, there will always be the ego masquerading as something that it is not. The ego is very crafty. Trust me, the ego this illusion was not designed for each and every one of us to just wake up so easily. That is why in some other cultures, again, more Eastern cultures, they may talk about multiple lifetimes and things of that sort. Like I said, in the West, we do not necessarily go into such deep concepts such as rebirth and incarnation, reincarnation, things of that sort. We don't really look into things that much. However, in the East, it's very common to believe that it's a possibility, or at least it may be probable, that if you don't get it right in this lifetime, it's a possibility that maybe, hey, you could get it right in the next lifetime, because we all know that this life could be very, very harsh, very, very disturbing. There could be a lot of different obstacles in our way, and sometimes we live a whole lifetime of sorrow, and so we know that this life could be very, very challenging. So at the same time, that is why, like I said, individuals in the East may give the notion that there's a strong probability or possibility that there may be multiple lifetimes to get it right. Because again, many of us may not even get it right in this lifetime. Many of us may not break free in this lifetime. So it could be probable, fair to say, if you didn't get it right this time, hey, maybe the next time. But again, I'm not saying that this is a fact. I'm not saying that this is one way to look at it as well, because in this lifetime, life, we all know, life is not an easy road. The flow state, look at ourselves as being the river. Does the river, when the river flows to the town, does the river say to itself, Look at all the animals that I feed. Look at all the birds and all of the trees that I support. Look at all the villages that I take care of with my water. No, the water, the river does none of these things. The river just does what it does, and that is what is called a flow state. When we do things from a perspective where we are not looking or seeking for any reward. However, that can only be achieved when we come to the understanding of who and what we truly are. Because the false self will always, always, always seek gratitude. Again, just like the river, just like the sea behind me, the sea does not say, oh, I am keeping the fish alive. Oh, I am making the boats be able to travel and go from place to place. No, the sea is not doing any of that. The sea does not have any feelings. The sea is neutral. Even when the sea does bad, and I shouldn't say bad because there is no bad. Even when the sea is really rough and there are storms and there's a hurricane or something of that sort, and it does some type of damage, the sea has no feeling about anything at all. The sea is a neutral thing, and that is what we need to come to the conclusion that we are like the screen, we are like the wind, so we are like the air that the wind and the clouds are pairing. So there is nothing for us to be attached to, because there is no us per se that exists to be attached to these things. So again, until this realization comes to the understanding of who we are, and we come to the flow like the river, flow like the sea, flow like the sky, we will always be disappointed. We will always seek. We will always, 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 always be imprisoned, believing that we are the false self, and the false self will never, ever, ever release us from this bondage. So hope that this video is another video. Hopefully this clears up the concept of having an understanding again that we must come to a true understanding of who we are, because the false self itself will always keep us in some type of physical, mental, psychological, and emotional and financial bondage. So I'm going to end this. So very, very, very powerful statement about the flow state. I guess some individuals from the East would be very familiar with the flow state. However, individuals in the West may not be so familiar with that concept. However, the flow state is more of a Taoist concept. So the flow state, when we are in a flow state, the flow state is more so of a neutral state. Like I said, the river, when a river flows through the town, the river does not take any recognition for anything that it does. The river does not say, oh, I was able to feed or give all the water, give the animals something to drink. The river does not say, oh, I gave the people of that town water so they could wash their clothes. Oh, I gave the people in the vicinity water so they could take a bath. No, the river does nothing of the sort. The river simply flows. That is the difference again between doing something from the isness, the being, the consciousness state. And again, very difficult concept, because again, we are naturally, as human beings, naturally we tend to want to get reward. Naturally we want to get recognition. Naturally we want to be acknowledged. Naturally we tend to want to get some type of acknowledgement. So again, however, the flow state, I guess, like I said, the sea behind me, the sea also is more so of a neutral entity, if I may say. The sea does not say, oh, look how much fish, no, look at how many fishes that I provide a place for them to live in. The sea doesn't say, oh, look how I provide all of the sea creatures, the animals and so forth to survive. The sea doesn't say, oh, look how I'm giving the humans ability to transport get from one place to the next using their boats or whatever means of transportation, sea vehicles that they may have. No, the sea does not say any of that. The sea is a it's a neutral entity, and so that is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a neutral state to where we're not feeding the ego. I know, again, a very difficult concept, not so easy, very, very, very difficult concept to actually achieve. We can't just go and achieve this flow state naturally if we do not know who we are, because as long as the ego, as long as the false self exists, we will constantly try to give our self praise, self recognition, even when we're doing good things, even when we're trying to do some things for others as well. This is just human nature. Unfortunately, there's no escaping it. The best of us, no matter who we are, in most cases, when we do something good, we tend to want to tap ourselves on the shoulder, and some of us, even if we do it behind closed doors, even if we do the most kind acts, we still tend to feel a certain way, and maybe we tell somebody on the down low, hey, I just gave a guy some money and that was my last $2 I had. We might say it subtly, or we might not make such a big deal, but in most cases, many of us are not able to just do good deeds, and feel good about it and move on, because it's just the right thing to do. So again, the flow state, the natural state, the sea does not have any type of feelings at all. The sea is a neutral thing, just like the screen, that the videos, the movies that are played on the screen, when who play video games, you guys be playing a violent game, shooting guns and whatever the case may be. The games that are played on the screen does not affect the screen at all. You could be playing some funny game, some SpongeBob SquarePants, some kind of comedy game or whatever the case may be. The screen is not affected at all. So when somebody is shot on the screen in a video game, the screen does not feel any animosity. The screen doesn't feel bad. And so the same thing applies to the sea as well. Though the sea may be a resource for individuals to get to and fro to travel. The sea may be used for us to get resources from, to get fishes and different things. But when something goes wrong, like there's a storm and somebody dies at sea, and there's a hurricane or something, and there's a shipwreck, the sea has no feelings about it at all. The sea doesn't feel one way or another. It doesn't feel bad that thousands and thousands of people died in some type of shipwreck, because the sea is a neutral thing. And so the same thing would apply to you as well. From who you are as a consciousness of being level, you are like the sea, you are like the screen, you are a neutral thing. So when anything happens to you per se, it does not technically happen to the isness, the I-ness, the beingness of who you are. Again, very, very deep, deep concept. But again, like I said, again, you guys, very deep concept, very hard to grasp at first, but again, that is what we're talking about, being more of a neutral entity, neutral, not being affected so much by anything. That is the goal, breaking free from this prison, the prison walls, knowing who you are, and understanding that you are not technically being affected by anything. This video, once again, hopefully this has been an informative video in reference to coming to know thyself. And please go and share, like, and watch and subscribe, or to one of my other videos, and check those videos out as well, because these videos are all going to be complementary of each other, basically with the same basic message, is to come to an understanding of who yourself truly is. And if you do not come to that understanding, there will always be prison walls, prison of attachments of the mind, and prison walls, attachments of needs, desires, and wants and lusts, and things that cannot actually dissipate until the true self actually dissipates. There will always be suffering. So with that being said, I would like to end this video. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will get out and talk to you guys with another video soon. Very shortly I will create another video, and until then, please stay safe, be strong, and know thyself, because you are the true self, and there is no other self other than you. Triple P, and I'm out. Thank you so much, Topal.